He was rescued at 4 years old, living with pigs in a pigsty, and what happens next to the boy surprises everyone. Miguel never knew the warmth of a real home until the day strangers came to rescue him from a pigsty. Living in a world made of mud and filth, his fate was radically altered by the arrival of social workers, bringing hope and a new life. Facing fears, uncertainties, and the challenge of adaptation, Miguel discovers a new world with an unexpected refuge that becomes a bridge to his new life. Follow Miguel's emotional journey, a resilient boy who, through love and the transformative power of music, finds his voice and the promise of a bright future. Miguel was surrounded by a world that made no sense. The pigsty, with its mud walls and filth, was all he knew. For the 4-year-old boy, it was home, though not in the conventional sense of the word. The pigs, with their grunts and clumsy movements, became his silent companions, the only creatures he felt comfortable with. Miguel watched them with wide, curious eyes as he sat in a dirty corner, his little hands covered in mud and his disheveled hair sticking to his forehead. However, that day, something was about to change. The sound of approaching engines and human voices broke the silence. A group of social workers, accompanied by some reporters and a film crew, had arrived at the pigsty. Miguel, in his state of confusion, did not understand the commotion forming around him. He looked at the strange faces, each carrying a mixture of concern and determination. "Let's find him. He must be here somewhere," said one of the social workers, her voice firm but gentle. The team began to search the place, and soon Miguel's eyes met those of a woman who crouched in front of him. She had brown hair and a kind expression that seemed to radiate warmth and safety. "Hello, little one. You are safe now. We are here to help you," the woman said, extending her hand. Miguel hesitated. Her hand was strange and did not resemble the ground of the pigsty or the skin of the pigs. He looked at the animals around him, seeking comfort in their familiarity. For a moment, he felt torn between what he knew and what was new and frightening. "You can come with us. It won't hurt," the woman insisted, her eyes shining with a hope that Miguel did not understand. The social workers tried different approaches, but Miguel remained seated, immobile, as if words could not reach him. He watched as the pigs moved around him, their soft voices mixing with the confusion of the outside world. "Look, Miguel," said a young social worker, trying to catch his attention. "We have food here. Do you like apples?" She held up a shiny red apple, the sunlight reflecting on its surface. Miguel's gaze fixed on the fruit. The apple was new, clean, and seemed to promise a sweet, fresh taste that contrasted with the food he knew. Slowly, he stood up, his bare feet finding the cold ground. The young woman smiled, encouraging him to approach. "That's right, come on. It's just a step." She extended her hand, offering the apple. With a hesitant movement, Miguel approached the woman and, with an almost instinctive gesture, took the apple. The taste was wonderful, and he bit into it with relish, feeling the sweetness fill his mouth. That simple experience seemed magical, and for a moment, he forgot about the place he was in. "That's right. You are doing very well," exclaimed the woman, her eyes shining with joy. With the apple in hand, Miguel finally felt drawn to the idea of leaving the pigsty. He looked at the pigs, who now grunted in an almost sad way, as if they knew their friend was about to leave. He hesitated again, but the social worker's hand was firm by his side, and the promise of a new world called him. "Let's go, Miguel. You are going to a better place," the woman said, gently leading him out of the pigsty. The sunlight hit him hard, blinding his eyes for a moment. As he adjusted, Miguel found himself surrounded by people speaking quickly, gesturing, and pointing. He did not understand what they were saying, but the energy in the air was palpable. There was something both exciting and terrifying. He was far from the pigs and the pigsty, but the uncertainty of what was to come made him feel vulnerable. When they finally put him in a van that would take him to a new home, Miguel settled into one of the seats, looking out the window. The world moved quickly, and each new scene that passed seemed like a distant dream. Trees, houses, children playing on the sidewalks. Everything was new and different. He wondered if that place could be as welcoming as the pigsty. "Are you okay, Miguel?" asked the social worker, looking at him with concern. Miguel did not respond. He just nodded, still in shock. The words did not seem to fit in his mind, and he lost himself in his thoughts, a sea of tumultuous emotions. He did not know what it meant to be okay or not okay. All he felt was the absence of his pigs and the doubt about what was to come. After what seemed like an eternity, the van finally stopped in front of a house. It was a simple building, with white walls and a small garden in front. Miguel observed, intrigued. The door opened, and a man and a woman came out to greet him. The man had gray hair and a warm look, while the woman, with a gentle smile, seemed full of energy. "Hello, Miguel. Welcome to our home," said the man, extending his hand. "I'm Alejandro, and this is Clara. We are so happy you are here," the woman added, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Miguel looked at them, a mixture of curiosity and distrust. He did not know how to react. The house smelled different, a mixture of coffee and flowers, and the sounds coming from inside were new and intriguing. He felt like a stranger in a place that did not belong to him. "Are you hungry? We made a special snack for you," Clara said, her voice soft like a lullaby. "Come on, let's go inside." Miguel hesitated again. Her words were sweet, but he did not know what to expect. He looked at Alejandro and Clara, who watched him with hope and patience. Finally, he took a step forward, and the door opened to a completely new world. Inside the house, everything was different. The walls were decorated with colorful paintings, and there was a piano in a corner of the room. Miguel looked at the instrument, drawn to it in a way he could not understand. The piano seemed to shine in the soft light coming through the window, as if it were waiting for him. "Do you like music?" Alejandro asked, noticing Miguel's gaze. The boy did not know how to answer. He had never heard music like the one present in that home. What he knew were the grunts of the pigs and the silence of the pigsty. But there was something about the piano that called to him, something that resonated within him in a way he could not explain. "Let's show you some things," Clara said, happy with the boy's interest. "You can play if you want." Miguel slowly approached the piano, his fingers hesitating over the keys. He did not know how to play, but he felt an inexplicable connection with the instrument. With a timid gesture, he pressed a key, producing a sound that echoed through the room. "That's right," Clara exclaimed, smiling. "You are making music." Miguel looked at her, confused but at the same time intrigued. He pressed another key, and another sound joined the first. A small smile began to form on his face. The music seemed to bring a sense of freedom he had never experienced before. As he explored the piano, Alejandro and Clara exchanged hopeful looks. They watched as the boy, who had been rescued from such a dark world, began to find his voice in a safe and loving place. Music, with its ability to touch the soul, could be the key for Miguel to connect with his new home and, perhaps, with himself. And so, in the warmth of that home, Miguel began his journey of discovery, surrounded by people who believed in him, even when he did not yet know how to believe in himself. Miguel observed the new house with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Every corner seemed to vibrate with sounds he did not fully understand but somehow attracted him. The living room, with its walls decorated with paintings and shelves full of books, was a space that exuded a sense of welcome, but for the boy, everything was still very new and intimidating. Alejandro and Clara, his new adoptive parents, tried to communicate with him. Clara, with her soft and melodious voice, crouched down to Miguel's level, looking him in the eyes. "Hi, Miguel. How are you feeling today?" The question hung in the air, but Miguel did not respond. He lost himself in his thoughts, looking at the floor, where small chalk drawings were still visible, traces of a child who had played there before. Alejandro, noticing Miguel's difficulty in opening up, decided to try a different approach. He remembered a small drum he had found in the garage and went to get it, returning shortly after with the instrument. "Miguel, do you want to see something cool?" His voice was animated, as if about to reveal a secret. Miguel lifted his head, his eyes fixing on the drum. Something inside him ignited, a spark of curiosity. Alejandro began to lightly tap the drum, creating a smooth and engaging rhythm. Miguel watched, fascinated. The sound was different from anything he had heard before. He wanted to play too, but hesitated, as if part of him was trapped between the desire and the fear of exposing himself. Clara, noticing the boy's hesitation, smiled and encouraged him. "You can play, Miguel. Just follow the rhythm that Dad is making." With a hesitant movement, Miguel extended his hand and touched the drum. The sound he made was irregular, but there was a purity in the way he surrendered to the music. Alejandro and Clara exchanged satisfied looks, relieved to see that Miguel was allowing himself to experiment. "That's right, Miguel. Very good," Alejandro exclaimed, increasing the rhythm. Miguel, now more confident, began to engage with the beat, his face lighting up with a shy smile. After some time, Miguel grew tired of the drum and began to explore the room, his steps still cautious. Clara, noticing that the boy was looking for something more, decided to take him to the piano that occupied a special corner of the room. "Look, Miguel, here is the piano. Would you like to try it?" She spoke with contagious enthusiasm, opening the instrument's lid. Miguel slowly approached, his fingers stretching toward the shiny keys. He hesitated for a moment, but when he finally pressed a key, a sweet sound burst through the air. He repeated the action, and each note seemed to carry away a piece of his anguish. Alejandro leaned against the door, watching Miguel explore the piano with the same curiosity an artist feels when discovering new colors on a palette. "That's amazing, Miguel. You are making music," Alejandro said, his voice overflowing with pride. Clara joined him, delighted by the scene. "See how you can create beautiful sounds. Play more, dear." Miguel began to play random keys, but each sound that emerged seemed to tell a story. He was communicating in a way he had never done before. The notes echoed through the room, and the adoptive parents sat beside him, listening attentively. Miguel closed his eyes for a moment, lost in his own musical world, and the room filled with a respectful silence, as if the surrounding space was also listening. The weeks passed, and Alejandro and Clara's house transformed into a home. Miguel still struggled to communicate verbally, but his interactions began to take shape through music. He became more confident every day, and his parents noticed how music was a bridge between the boy and the world around him. One night, while the moon illuminated the room with a soft glow, Clara decided to surprise Miguel. "Miguel, how about a little performance for Dad? We can play together," she suggested with a smile, sitting next to him at the piano. Alejandro, standing behind them, watched with anticipation. Miguel looked at the keys and hesitated for a moment, but Clara began to play a simple and sweet melody, and Miguel, by instinct, joined her. With his hands on the keys, he began to follow the rhythm, the notes intertwining in a smooth harmony. It was a song that had emerged from a distant memory, something Miguel had heard before, but now came to life under his fingers. "That's beautiful, Miguel. You are doing very well," Clara exclaimed, while Alejandro clapped enthusiastically. Joy overflowed the environment, and Miguel felt a wave of happiness wash over him. He did not need words. The music spoke for him. In the following days, Miguel continued to explore the piano. He began to identify different sounds and melodies, and his attempts to communicate verbally slowly started to take shape. Alejandro, noticing the connection that music was creating, decided to use songs to teach Miguel about the world around him. "Let's learn about animals, Miguel. Look, I will sing a song about pigs, just like the ones you knew before," Alejandro said, imitating the sounds of a pig. Miguel looked at him, intrigued, and soon began to laugh. Satisfied, Alejandro continued, making exaggerated gestures with his hands, turning the lesson into a fun performance. This light and relaxed moment was a way for Miguel to open up. He began to mimic the sounds and movements, engaging with the songs, and the room now was filled with laughter and music. Clara joined them, bringing her guitar and adding chords to the melody, while Miguel experimented with playing the piano and singing along. The environment became increasingly welcoming, a space where Miguel could be himself without fear of judgment. "You have an incredible talent, Miguel. Music is a language, and you are learning to speak it very well," Clara said, while Miguel nodded, still immersed in the joy of the moment. The boy began to realize that, through music, he was not alone. He had a family that supported him. As days turned into weeks, Miguel began to make small achievements. He became more involved in daily activities, and in moments that were previously difficult, he now responded with gestures or musical expressions. Alejandro and Clara were moved by seeing their son's progress. It was as if each note played was a step toward the communication that Miguel still struggled to achieve. One morning, while Miguel was sitting at the piano, he suddenly began to play a melody that was completely new. The notes danced in the air, and Clara and Alejandro stopped what they were doing to listen. Miguel seemed completely absorbed in the music, his eyes shining with a light they had not seen before. When he finally stopped, there was an expression of satisfaction on his face. "Miguel, that was wonderful. What did you just play? Did you create that yourself?" Clara asked, surprised. The boy looked at her, a shy smile blooming on his lips. Although he had no words to respond, his look said it all. He was finding himself, expressing himself in a way he had never done before. "I think he is showing us that music is his voice," Alejandro commented, and Clara agreed, holding Miguel's hand lovingly. The boy looked at them, feeling loved and understood in a way that was new to him. Music was becoming the bridge that united them all, a form of communication that transcended words. As Miguel continued his musical journey, each day was a new opportunity for discovery. He was beginning to understand that, even amidst challenges, there was beauty in music and love in the connection he was building with his new family. And as the notes echoed through the house, Miguel felt more and more at home, as if he had finally found his place in the world. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Alejandro and Clara's house, casting a soft glow on the piano in the corner of the living room. Miguel, still a bit sleepy, watched the instrument with curiosity. Since his arrival, the piano had become a source of fascination and comfort. Clara, noticing the boy's attentive gaze, decided it was time for another music lesson. "Miguel," she called softly, "let's play a little today?" The boy turned slowly, still a bit hesitant. He had learned to recognize his name, but the words and sounds still seemed distant, like echoes from a world he barely understood. Clara approached the piano and gently touched the keys. The sound resonated through the room, and Miguel smiled, drawn to the melody. "Look, Miguel, this is a song I really like. Do you want to try playing a note?" Clara encouraged, pointing to a white key. Miguel hesitated for a moment, but curiosity overcame his fear. He approached the piano, his small hands trembling slightly. Clara watched, her heart full of hope. Miguel pressed the key, producing a clear sound that echoed through the room. "That's right. Very good," Clara exclaimed enthusiastically. "Now try playing again." He repeated the action, and Clara's smile widened. What began as a simple touch became a sequence of notes. Miguel seemed to be in a trance, as if the music was speaking directly to him. Clara felt a growing emotion as she watched her adoptive son open up to the world through the piano keys. "You are doing very well, Miguel. How about we try playing a more familiar melody?" Clara suggested, eager to see how far he could go. She began to play a simple song, and Miguel, after a few moments of attentive listening, started to follow along. The room filled with harmonious sounds, and Clara could barely hold back tears of joy. Miguel was truly expressing himself, and with each note, she felt a barrier breaking between them. When the music ended, Clara applauded enthusiastically. "You were amazing, Miguel. Let's do this more often," she said, while the boy looked at her, still a bit lost in his new discovery. Alejandro, who had heard the music from the next room, entered with a wide smile on his face. "What happened here? I heard wonderful sounds. Miguel, you are becoming a real musician." He crouched beside the piano, looking into the boy's eyes. Miguel, a bit shy, averted his gaze, but a slight smile appeared on his face. Alejandro's approval made him feel more at ease. Music, somehow, seemed to have created an invisible bond between them. "Let's try something new now," Alejandro proposed, his mind buzzing with ideas. "What if we used music to learn about the world? We can tell stories through songs." Clara agreed excitedly. "That's a great idea, Alejandro. Miguel, would you like to learn about a new place through music?" Miguel looked at both of them, his expression still confused, but curiosity was present. They decided to start with Mexico, the country where they lived. Alejandro began to play a popular folk song while Clara explained its history to Miguel. "This song talks about our people's traditions, Miguel," Clara said, gesturing enthusiastically. "It tells us about the festivals, the dances, and the joy of being together." Miguel listened attentively, and when the song ended, he seemed to reflect on Clara's words. It was the first time he saw music as something more than just sounds. It was a way to understand the world around him. "Let's try it together," Alejandro suggested, and soon, everyone began to play and sing, creating an atmosphere of joy and unity. Miguel, though still not speaking much, was communicating through music. As time passed, the music lessons became a daily ritual. With each new song, Miguel revealed a bit more of his personality. He learned to play melodies that seemed to dance in the air, and his confidence grew with each note played. Clara and Alejandro watched with pride, realizing that music was not just a skill Miguel was developing, but a powerful vehicle for communication. One afternoon, Miguel was particularly excited. He had spent the entire day playing and experimenting with new melodies. When Clara entered the room, she found him sitting at the piano, focused on a sequence of notes he had created. "Miguel, what are you playing?" Clara asked, surprised by the joy in his eyes. He stopped for a moment and looked at her, as if trying to organize his thoughts. Then, with a gentle gesture, he began to play again, and the notes floated through the room, creating a magical atmosphere. "That's beautiful, Miguel," Clara exclaimed, her heart melting at the boy's talent. "Did you do that by yourself?" Miguel nodded slowly, a shy smile forming on his face. Clara felt a wave of emotion as she realized he was expressing himself in a way that had previously seemed impossible. "You know, Miguel," Alejandro said, entering the room, "music is a way of telling stories. What are you trying to tell us with this melody?" Miguel hesitated, his gaze lost on the piano keys. He did not know how to explain. The music seemed to be an extension of his feelings, something he was still learning to understand, but somehow, he knew that the music spoke for him, even without words. "Maybe he is telling us about freedom," Clara suggested, looking at Miguel tenderly. The freedom he found in music. Miguel lifted his head, and his eyes shone. The idea of freedom, even though an abstract concept for him, resonated strongly. He was freeing himself from the shadows of the pigsty and the limitations that had surrounded him before. Music was becoming his cry for freedom. The days continued, and the bond between Miguel, Alejandro, and Clara deepened. Music became a bridge that united them, and each note played was a step toward a greater understanding. However, not everything was easy. Although Miguel was evolving in his musical ability, he still faced challenges in interacting with other children. On a sunny day, Alejandro decided to take Miguel to the park so he could play with other children. Clara prepared a snack and sent them off with an encouraging smile. "Have fun. And remember, Miguel, if you need help, look for an adult." Miguel looked at the park, where children ran and played, laughing and shouting. The scene was vibrant, but he felt a knot in his stomach. As they approached, he noticed the children playing ball. He hesitated, feeling a bit out of place. "Miguel, let's play." Alejandro encouraged him, but the boy was paralyzed by shyness. He watched from a distance, unable to join in. The voices and laughter seemed like a sea of confusing sounds, and he did not know how to enter the game. "Come on, I'm here with you," Alejandro said, trying to encourage him, but Miguel just shook his head negatively. Deep down, he wanted to play, but the idea of approaching other children was terrifying. Alejandro understood the situation and decided it was best not to force him. "It's okay, Miguel. Let's just watch for a moment." Meanwhile, the children began to notice Miguel and Alejandro's presence. A girl approached, with a friendly smile. "Hi, do you want to play with us?" she asked, but Miguel just looked at her without responding. The girl looked at Alejandro, who smiled encouragingly, but Miguel still could not move. He was trapped in his own world, struggling to understand how to fit in there. "Let's, Miguel," Alejandro said. "Let's just watch, and if you feel comfortable, we can try playing a little later." Miguel nodded, and the two sat on a bench, watching. As they watched, Miguel began to relax a bit. He liked the movement, the laughter, and the energy the children transmitted. However, the idea of getting involved still seemed scary. "You know, Miguel," Alejandro began, "music can help us make friends. Often, children connect through songs and games. When you feel ready, maybe you can play something for them." Miguel looked at his adoptive father, thoughtful. The idea of playing for the children seemed both attractive and intimidating. He loved music, but exposing himself in a new environment was a challenge. "Let's just enjoy the moment," Alejandro said, understanding Miguel's internal struggle. "We are together, and that is what matters." And so, they remained seated, watching the children play. Miguel still felt some anxiety, but Alejandro's reassuring presence helped to ease some of the fear. He knew he was not alone and that, when he was ready, he could try to connect with others through music. The sun was setting, tinting the sky with a soft orange, when Clara and Alejandro arrived at the school for the annual spring event. Laughter and the sounds of children playing filled the air, but Miguel, with his hands in his jacket pockets, remained in a corner, away from the bustle. Clara watched her son with concern, while Alejandro tried to calm her. "He will get used to it, Clara," said Alejandro, placing a hand on her shoulder. "He is just adjusting to all this." Clara shook her head, unconvinced. Her heart was racing. Miguel had shown so much progress with music, but socialization was still a challenge. The idea of seeing him isolated at an event that was supposed to be joyful made her anxious. "What if he feels lonely?" asked Clara, her voice trembling. "I just want him to feel part of the world. He is part of our world," Alejandro replied, trying to convey confidence. "Let's give him time. Music is our connection, and little by little, he will find his place." Miguel watched the children playing with a distant look. He did not understand the rules of that social game, and it made him uneasy. The sound of the piano coming from the auditorium attracted him, and he began to walk towards the door, drawn by the familiar melody. Clara noticed the change in her son's behavior and followed closely, while Alejandro worried about the event's preparations. "Miguel, wait," Clara called, but he did not seem to hear her. He was immersed in his own thoughts, and music seemed to be the only thing connecting him to the outside world. When Miguel entered the auditorium, he sat at the piano, his fingers dancing over the keys instinctively. The melody he began to play was soft and melancholic, reflecting his inner struggle. Clara stood at the door, moved by her son's passion for music. "Look," someone whispered among the audience. "It's the boy who plays the piano." The voices fell silent as everyone paid attention to the boy who, even without words, managed to express deep emotions through his notes. Miguel was lost in his own creation, and for a moment, he forgot about the world around him. "That's beautiful," exclaimed a mother in the audience, while other children began to approach, drawn by the music. Clara felt a mixture of pride and pain, seeing that although Miguel was connecting with music, he was still distant from social interaction. After the performance, as the applause echoed through the auditorium, Miguel stood up abruptly, startled by the attention. He looked at the clapping faces, but could not understand what it meant. Clara ran to him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "You were amazing, my love," she said, wrapping him in a tight hug. Miguel hesitated, looking at the floor, but Clara's comforting touch made him feel safe. He did not know how to express what he felt, but the music had spoken for him. Meanwhile, Alejandro approached, unable to contain his emotion. "Miguel, you played with such feeling," he exclaimed, with a wide smile. "I am so proud of you." Miguel looked at his parents, his features still confused. He wanted to feel the same joy they were showing, but the pressure of social interaction made him anxious. Alejandro, noticing this, decided to shift the focus a bit. "What do you think about finding a quieter place?" he suggested, looking at Miguel. "We can play together?" Miguel slowly nodded, still processing the emotions surrounding him. The three of them moved away from the auditorium's hustle and headed to a quieter corner of the school, where a small music room was available. When they reached the room, Miguel sat at the piano again, and Alejandro picked up a guitar that was leaning against the wall. Clara positioned herself beside him, ready to sing. Music began to flow, and the notes intertwined in harmony, creating a safe space where Miguel felt comfortable. "Let's play a song you like, Miguel. How about Cielito Lindo?" Clara suggested, smiling. Miguel looked at her, his eyes shining with the idea. He loved that song. As the three played together, the tension on Miguel's face began to dissipate. The notes turned into smiles, and music became a bridge that united them. They laughed, had fun, and for a moment, Miguel's fear and anxiety were replaced by the pure joy of musical creation. After the performance, while the other students gathered for group activities, Miguel remained seated at the piano, entertained with the keys. He was in his own world again. But now there was something different. Music was not just an escape. It was a way to connect, even though he still did not know how to do it verbally. The room's door opened, and a new student entered. Diego, a boy with messy hair and curious eyes, watched Miguel for a moment. He also had a different glow in his eyes, one that reflected struggle and understanding. Diego approached slowly, hesitant but attracted by the music. "You play very well," Diego said, with a shy smile. Miguel looked at him, surprised and a bit embarrassed, but instead of stepping back, he leaned forward, as if music united them. "Do you want to play with me?" Miguel asked, finally finding courage in the notes dancing in his mind. Diego nodded enthusiastically and sat beside him. The two began to play together, and the room soon filled with joyful notes. Music flowed between them, creating a connection that words could not describe. Clara and Alejandro watched from the door, moved by the friendship forming. The fear and insecurity that Miguel felt towards others seemed to disappear as music became the language that united those two boys. "Wow, that's amazing," Diego exclaimed, as they finished a small piece. Miguel smiled, and the feeling of belonging he so desired began to take shape. "Do you also play?" Miguel asked, curious. "Yes, I like to play drums and guitar, but music is always more fun when we are together," Diego replied, winking. The conversation between them flowed naturally, as if music had opened a door to a new world. Clara and Alejandro exchanged smiles of satisfaction. Seeing Miguel opening up to a friendship was a significant step in his journey. Music was not just an escape for him, but a means of communication that could connect hearts. "Maybe we can form a band," Diego suggested, excited. "What do you think, Miguel?" Miguel looked at him, his heart pounding with the possibility of a new connection. He had never thought about having a band, but the idea fascinated him. Music had always been his best friend, and now he had the chance to share it with someone who understood him. "I would love that," Miguel responded, and the sincerity in his voice made Diego smile even more. Clara and Alejandro, still watching, exchanged smiles of satisfaction. Seeing Miguel opening up to a friendship was a significant step in his journey. Music was not just an escape for him, but a means of communication that could connect hearts. While the boys continued to play and laugh, Clara approached, touching Miguel's shoulder lovingly. "I am so proud of you, my love. Music is truly magical, isn't it?" she said, her eyes shining. Miguel looked at her and nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude. That magical afternoon, marked by music and friendship, would be a turning point in Miguel's life. He had found a friend who also understood the struggle of communicating, and together they could explore a new path. A path where music not only told their stories but also built bonds and friendships that could last a lifetime. As dusk turned to night, the school filled with laughter and chords, and Miguel, for the first time, felt he had found a place where he truly belonged. Miguel was in a state of euphoria after the performance with Diego. The sparkle in his eyes and the wide smile spreading across his face were clear signs that he had found a space where he felt accepted. The applause from the audience still echoed in his mind, but as days passed, the pressure to enroll in a music school began to weigh on his small shoulders. Clara and Alejandro were determined to give Miguel the best education possible, and the music school they had in mind was renowned. However, the institution's administration was well known for their resistance to students with challenging backgrounds, especially those who did not exactly fit the expected mold. The couple knew this fight would be arduous, but the hope of seeing Miguel flourish in an environment that understood him kept them going. On that sunny morning, Clara and Alejandro sat at the kitchen table, steaming coffee in front of them, discussing how to approach the school. Clara, with nervous hands, fiddled with her cup, while Alejandro spoke firmly. "We need to be clear about his talent, Clara. Miguel is not just a child who has gone through hardships. He is a musical prodigy. If they can't see that, it's their loss," said Alejandro, his voice almost palpable with passion. "I know, love, but what if they don't accept him? What if they say he isn't adequate?" "That could hurt Miguel a lot," responded Clara, her voice trembling slightly. The idea of failing to help her son achieve his dreams worried her deeply. "We have to try. He needs a chance. You saw how he shone with Diego. That's not something you see every day." "Music is his language," insisted Alejandro, determined. Miguel, who was in his room, heard the conversation. Although he didn't understand every word, he felt the tension in the air and the concern in his parents. He didn't know exactly what it meant to go to a new school, but the idea of not being accepted made him uneasy. He moved away from his piano, which was his refuge, and walked to his room, where he sat in a dark corner, hugging his knees. Clara, noticing Miguel's sadness, decided to go to him. When she entered the room, she saw the boy lost in his thoughts, with a distant look. Her heart ached seeing the despair in his face. "Miguel?" She approached, her voice soft and welcoming. He lifted his gaze, but didn't respond. Clara sat next to him, respecting his space, but wanting him to open his heart like he did with music. "I know you're worried. Sometimes people don't understand how special you are. But we are going to fight for you, my love," she said, stroking his hair. Miguel closed his eyes, trying to process the conflicting emotions. He wanted to believe that everything would be okay, but the pressure of expectations seemed overwhelming. The idea of not being accepted at the music school, of not being understood, made him feel like he was going back to the pigsty, surrounded by shadows and noises he had no idea how to face. Alejandro entered the room shortly after, noticing the conversation between mother and son. He crouched beside them, placing a hand on Miguel's shoulder. "You know you can count on us, don't you? We will always be here to support you, no matter what happens," he said. Miguel looked at his parents, searching for comfort, but the words didn't come. Instead, he got up abruptly and went to the piano. He sat and started playing a melody that came from his pain. The notes were heavy and full of emotion, a silent cry of anguish that only music could express. Clara and Alejandro exchanged surprised looks. The music Miguel was playing was not just a sequence of notes. It was an emotional storm. Each chord carried the struggle and despair he felt, the pressure that oppressed him. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as the notes filled the room, echoing Miguel's story, his pain, and his fight for acceptance. "Miguel, that's incredible," Alejandro murmured, enchanted and moved. "Keep going, my son. We are listening." Miguel, enveloped in his own creation, didn't stop. He lost himself in the music, letting each note speak for him. Clara and Alejandro sat in silence, absorbing the depth of Miguel's expression. It was as if he was talking to them in a way that words could never capture. After a few minutes, the melody slowly turned into something softer, almost hopeful. Miguel finished the piece with a final chord that reverberated in the room. He looked at his parents, and their expressions were of pure admiration and love. "Miguel, you are an artist," Clara said, still with tears in her eyes. "That music, you managed to convey everything you're feeling. That's powerful." Alejandro nodded, pride overflowing in his voice. "And that's exactly what we are going to take to the music school. We will show them what you can do. They won't be able to ignore your talent." Miguel, despite the confusion in his mind, felt a small ray of hope growing in his heart. His parents' support was invaluable. If they believed in him, maybe there was a real chance that others would too. He got up from the piano bench and hugged Clara and Alejandro tightly, a hug that spoke more than 1,000 words. The next day, Clara and Alejandro went to the music school with Miguel by their side, hearts pounding in their chests. They were received by the principal, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a severe expression, who observed Miguel with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "So, this is the boy who wants to enroll?" Her voice was firm, but there was a touch of softness that seemed to indicate she was willing to listen. "Yes, ma'am. This is Miguel. He has exceptional musical talent, and we would like him to have the opportunity to study here," Alejandro began, trying to convey all the passion he felt for his son. "I understand. However, we have a rigorous selection process. We need to evaluate not only his musical skills but also his ability to integrate into the school environment," the principal responded, observing Miguel attentively. Clara felt a knot in her throat. "We understand, but Miguel has a special gift. He communicates through music in a way that's hard to describe. If we could, we would like him to have a chance to perform for you." The principal hesitated, looking at Miguel, who was silent beside his parents. He didn't seem threatening, but the doubt still hung in the air. "Very well, if he can perform, we can reconsider the enrollment. However, I can't promise anything." Miguel felt a chill in his stomach, but his parents' determination encouraged him. He stepped forward. "I can play," he said, his voice low but firm. "Great, let's go to the auditorium," the principal responded, leading them to a room resonant with the echo of piano notes that had already been played by many others. Miguel sat at the piano, his hands trembling slightly. The memories of the pigsty and loneliness returned, but he focused on the music. The melody that began to flow from his fingers was different from the one he had played at home. It was more hopeful, as if he was trying to show the world that he was there, ready to be seen and heard. Clara and Alejandro watched, their hands intertwined, hearts full of expectation. As Miguel played, the principal's expression began to change. The notes were clear and full of emotion, and it was impossible not to feel the depth of what Miguel was expressing. When he finished, the room remained silent for a few seconds, as if the echo of the music still floated in the air. The principal was the first to break the silence, applauding enthusiastically. "Miguel, that was extraordinary," the principal finally said, her tone now softer. "You truly have a gift." Miguel looked at his parents, the shine in their eyes showing that he had found a space where he could be understood. He felt that, finally, he was starting to free himself from the chains of the past, and that, with Clara and Alejandro's love and support, he could face any emotional storm that might still come. Clara was in her studio, surrounded by sheet music and musical instruments, when the phone rang. The call was unexpected, and when she answered, she felt a wave of expectation mixed with anxiety. On the other end of the line, a deep and warm voice introduced itself as music teacher Roberto, a renowned educator with a reputation for transforming young talents' lives. He had watched the recording of Miguel's performance and was deeply moved by it. "Clara, it's a pleasure to speak with you. My name is Roberto Hernandez. I am a music teacher at the Monterrey Academy of Arts." The tone of his voice was engaging, and Clara felt a chill in her stomach. "A pleasure, Professor. What can I do for you?" Clara replied, holding the phone firmly. "I saw your son Miguel's performance and was impressed by his talent. The way he expressed himself through music is remarkable. I would like to meet him personally and discuss some opportunities for him." Clara's breath quickened. Miguel had just started opening up to the world of music, and the idea of such an opportunity seemed like a dream coming closer to reality. "That would be amazing, Miguel. He is still adapting and," Clara hesitated, thinking about how her son might react to the idea. "I understand, and I want you to know that my intention is only to encourage and support him. I also went through difficulties in childhood. Music was my salvation, and I believe it can be for Miguel as well." The sincerity in Roberto's voice calmed some of Clara's fears. "I can ask him and," Clara began, but Roberto interrupted. "Don't worry, if he's not ready, we will respect that. We can arrange a visit, and everything will be done at his pace." Clara agreed to schedule a meeting. As soon as she hung up, a mix of hope and nervousness filled her. She turned to the studio, where Miguel was sitting at the piano, playing the keys randomly, as he always did when reflecting. "Miguel," Clara called, approaching him. He looked at her, his eyes shining with curiosity. "We have a surprise. A very famous music teacher wants to meet you. He heard your performance and was impressed." Miguel stopped playing and tilted his head to the side, processing the information. He still struggled to understand what it meant to be impressive. For him, music was a refuge, a safe place where his emotions could flow without barriers. "He wants to hear me play?" Miguel asked, his voice soft and hesitant. "Yes. He would like to meet you and hear what you have composed." Clara sat beside him, taking his hands in hers. "This could be a great opportunity, my love." Miguel looked at the piano, his expression quickly shifting between expectation and apprehension. He wasn't sure if he wanted to show what he had created. Clara noticed his internal conflict and decided to be patient. "We can just talk to him first. You don't have to play if you don't want to." Clara smiled, encouraging him. "The important thing is that you feel comfortable." On the scheduled day for the visit, the house was filled with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Clara and Alejandro tried to create a welcoming environment, organizing the music room and preparing some treats for the guest. Miguel, on the other hand, was in his room, wrapped in a bubble of uncertainty. He held a notebook where he scribbled melodies and lyrics that, until then, were just for him. When Roberto arrived, his presence lit up the room. He was a tall man, with gray hair and an aura of wisdom. His eyes shone with the same passion Clara had felt when she played her first chord on the piano. "Hello, Miguel." Roberto greeted with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Miguel looked at the teacher, feeling a bit intimidated but also curious. Clara made the introductions, and soon Roberto started a light conversation. "You know, Miguel, I also went through challenges when I was a child. Music helped me find my voice," Roberto said, sitting in a nearby chair. "Do you remember how you felt when you played that melody at the recital?" Miguel hesitated and then nodded slowly. He remembered the feeling of freedom music gave him, as if he could connect with the world in a way words could never express. "That's wonderful," Roberto continued. "Music is a universal language. It doesn't matter where you come from or what challenges you face. What matters is the emotion you put into it." Miguel began to feel more comfortable, listening to the teacher talk about his own story. He remembered that he was not alone and that others had also struggled like him. "Would you like to play something you wrote?" Roberto asked, his voice soft and encouraging. Miguel looked at Clara, who gave him a supportive gesture, encouraging him to try. He got up slowly and went to the piano. He sat down and looked at the keys, taking a deep breath. The room was silent, and all eyes were on him. He began to play a new composition he had worked on in recent weeks, a melody mixing sadness and hope. As his fingers danced over the keys, emotions began to flow. The sound was deep and engaging, and Miguel surrendered completely to the music. Roberto's eyes were fixed on him, admiring the way he expressed himself. As Miguel played, Clara and Alejandro exchanged looks, tears streaming down their faces. It was a moment of pure connection, where the notes and chords spoke louder than any word could. It was as if the music was telling Miguel's story, his pain, his hopes, and his dreams. When he finished, the room remained silent for a few seconds, as if the music's echo still floated in the air. Roberto was the first to break the silence, clapping enthusiastically. "Miguel, that was amazing. You have an extraordinary gift," Roberto exclaimed, standing up and approaching the piano. Miguel looked at the teacher, surprised and a bit embarrassed, but there was a shine in his eyes that spoke of pride and achievement. Clara and Alejandro also applauded, grateful for that special moment. "How do you feel when you play?" Roberto asked, his voice soft and encouraging. "I feel free," Miguel responded, his voice still shy but now more confident. "That's right. Music is freedom, and I see a bright future for you, Miguel," Roberto said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Do you think I can?" Miguel hesitated, the insecurity still present. "Do you think I can study music?" "Of course," Roberto responded quickly. "I can help you find a place at the academy where you can learn and grow. The important thing is that you keep doing what you love." Joy and hope filled the room. Clara and Alejandro exchanged looks of happiness, realizing that Miguel was finally getting the opportunity he so deserved. "Miguel, this is just the beginning. You are about to embark on an incredible journey, and we will be by your side every step of the way," Clara said, hugging her son. The bond between them solidified at that moment. Miguel had not only found his voice through music, but also the strength he needed to face the future. Music was not just a form of expression. It was the bridge that united them, a link that would lead to new possibilities. Roberto's visit became a turning point in Miguel's life. The teacher not only brought the promise of a musical future, but also the understanding that challenges could be overcome with love, patience, and above all, through music. Clara and Alejandro's love, along with Roberto's support, would become the solid foundation upon which Miguel could build his dreams. And so, as the afternoon turned into night, music continued to resonate in their lives, a reminder that even in the most difficult situations, there is always room for hope and transformation.